This is the inaugural stream of Rhode Island Atheists. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan, technically, educational organization dedicated to building a positive community for atheists, agnostics, humanists, and non-theists, fostering secular viewpoints, supportive of charitable contributions to society, and protecting and promoting the separation of church and state. And I say technically because while we don't officially associate with any one party a lot of the time seems to be always opposed to the things we care about. So it's kind of interesting how that works. Anyway, we have some great local partners we work with the community, such as the Women Project and Pride in Aging. We also are part of the Rhode Island Coalition for Reproductive Freedom, which fights for the rights, reproductive rights, abortion rights, things like that. In addition, we are an affiliate of the national organization, you might have heard of them, American Atheists. Our organization has had a very busy year. Some of our endeavors that we are especially proud of include we organize collection drives for food and socks. We fought back against book banners. Looking at you, Megan Riley, Mary Brammer, Tiffany McLeod, and all of you. Working with a large coalition of allies and passing the Rhode Island Freedom to Read Act so that people like Joe Gallo or, other insert conservative hates trans people politician here, local politician or would be wannabe politician, uh, who wanted to ban books because they're mad, they're big mad that not everyone agrees with their puritanical, outdated, and kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Not incompassionate, yes, but I was looking for a better word than that. But you get what I mean. The people who hate trans people so much and they're really mad that they can't get other people to hate them as much as they do. So they bully public school officials about it. Anyway, sorry for the tangent. We officially established the Rhode Island Day of Reason, which received a citation by the Secretary of State, Greg Amore. It was recognized with a congressional resolution. We participated in 4 local pride events and sponsored a local queer prom. Some of the pride events included I marched in the East Providence Pride Parade, and I marched in the Providence Pride Parade. There were at least a couple more events that I don't think I personally attended, but it was very nice. We testified on multiple bills at the State House. We handed out food to the homeless and our Sandwiches Without Sermon event like we had in years past. Actually, this past year, the sandwiches went so fast. I know I was 15 minutes late, and I got there, and there was only one sandwich left. Like the previous year, we had literally walked around for hours, handing out sandwiches, and we didn't run out till the very end. And we didn't even get out of Kennedy Plaza this time at Sandwiches Without Sermons, and all the food was gone because people are having such a hard time. Trump going out of his way to shut down SNAP benefits did not help people, and they're hurting. And we saw that firsthand when we went to go help the needy. There's a lot more needy around than usual. Things are not looking good. Very ominous sign. For the end of the year, we have a heathen holiday party coming up on December 12th. That's gonna be at Aiden's Pub in Bristol, celebrating Yule, Saturnalia, Solstice, Festivus, and the holiday season. The Festivus for the rest of us, you could say. Please RSVP if you're coming. Joe, where do they RSVP? Are you talking like on the Facebook event? I think he means on the Facebook. If you go to Rhode Island Atheist Facebook, there's a Facebook event. RSVP to that if you're going. And it would be at on here I have 7 p.m. That's the right time, right? Well, I could literally just check. Let's see, events. December 12th. Yep, 7 p.m. Aiden's Pub. Oh, a few people already RSVP'd. You should RSVP too. Don't miss out. FOMO, don't miss out. Don't miss out on the party. We have cake, usually. We have cake, right, Joe? RSVP via email, website message, social media message, etc. Nice. What kinds of sweets will the people enjoy at the Festivus party? Now, obviously, we don't celebrate the Christian holiday of Christmas, but we do celebrate the cultural holiday, which could be celebrated by anyone. Because a lot of the stuff, it's not really directly relevant to Christianity, is it? All of the gift giving, the Christianity, big materialist, right? It doesn't quite make sense, does it? Baby Jesus born to a jolly big man in a big red coat. Ho ho ho, baby Jesus, what do you want for Christmas? That didn't happen. I don't remember that part of the story. The Christmas trees. Not originally. Not a lot of trees around where Jesus was born. Were there a lot of pine trees just hanging around? Were there? I don't think so. Do they have pine trees in? Was it Nazareth? I don't know if they do. That's actually from the Yule tradition. That's the pagans celebrating the life during the winter. The pine trees staying alive and surviving through the cold winter months when everything else is dying. That was where the Christmas tree came from. It had nothing to do with Christianity. Kind of similar to Easter. The Easter bunny was not present at the crucifixion of Jesus. I double checked myself actually. All right, but no, it really the original Christian Christmas stuff has nothing to do with Christianity. It was all a pagan festival that the Christians took over and sort of what's appropriated, you could say, to convince people to convert to their religion from paganism. It's kind of like celebrating Halloween or Valentine's Day or other holidays. It's something that you know everyone celebrates. Not everyone celebrates. Most of a large proportion of the population of America celebrates. So you can bond with people over it. You can have similar traditions that happen every year. You have a lot of nostalgia. A lot of atheists grew up as religious people, me included. So you grew up celebrating these things, and it's an excuse to go talk to family, exchange gifts, receive gifts. Give me those gifts. Things like that. So have a nice meal. It's fun, and you can celebrate it without, as long as you don't make me pray at the dinner table, I'm good, kind of a thing. You know what I'm saying? It's one of those. And it's a lot of nostalgia. You have a lot of memories of doing it, even once you leave religion and realize that the whole, both the moral beliefs and the factual beliefs don't quite make sense, do they? But that's a whole different thing. But midwinter or winter solstice festivals have been celebrated since humans noticed that some days in the year are shorter than others, also colder. And, you know, a lot of Christians made a big stink back in the day. I know when I was in college, the whole red Starbucks cup thing, crazy. When I was in high school, oh, are you allowed to say Christmas? But yeah, a lot of Christians like to say, yeah, the libs are coming for Christmas. They're trying to kill Christmas. But actually, the only time Christmas was ever outlawed, it was in 1659 by Christians in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, enacted a law called Penalty for Keeping Christmas. And they thought that the festivals were superstitious, kept in other countries, were a great dishonor of God and offense to others. So they were against it for that reason. It wasn't Christian enough. That was why they were upset about it. But obviously, I don't know how long that lasted, but clearly it didn't last terribly long. And obviously, again, Jesus himself, the historical figure, was not actually born in December. I don't remember what time he was actually born, but yeah. Long before Christmas, the holidays like Yule and Saturnalia mark mark the season. A lot of Norse and Germanic traditions, all that stuff, great stuff. Saturnalia, ancient Roman god, agriculture, all of that. I'm not going through all of the Yule and Saturnalia stuff again, but you get the general idea. And now that I've got I can't believe I started an hour early. I was rushing too. I was like, "Oh my god, it's 11:02. I didn't start streaming yet. Oh, the banner fell. Oh, by the way, oh, we got a banner. That's nice. I had to move my TV. I knocked a lot of stuff off my TV stand to move the TV so that it wasn't in the way. Apparently, I could have taken my time with that. But we also, at one point, went to the State House because they were passing. Well, we went to the State House a few times, but the end of 2023, again, one of the first events I went to as a member of Rhode Island Atheists was when they were passing the Shield Act at the State House, which shields legislators from being basically sued from out-of-state entities for providing care that is legal here in the state, because it's not the other state's business. Because so if they try to uh, sue someone in Rhode Island for providing abortion care that is legal in Rhode Island, That basically gets slapped down as like a bad faith, them trying to usurp our state's rights to govern ourselves, of course, and also protecting doctors who provide gender affirming care to trans people. If an out of state entity tries to sue for providing care here that is legal here, that is not allowed, and they're protected from that, which is important because you do not want doctors making decisions when they're discussing with the family and with the doctor. The state should not be coming in and dictating to those two parties what kind of care is allowed. Obviously, that is not a good thing. I've also through Rhode Island Atheists, met a lot of the opposition activists who say very mean things about me. So it's a fun back and forth that we all have. So I think a lot of our Warwick meetings, we have the smaller group. We had a meeting in East Providence, and there had to be like 24 people there. We like packed that art studio. There were so many people. Oh, and then of course Jennifer. I think she painted the painting of Roger Williams that got put up at the State House. And thank you for Secretary of State Greg Amore for supporting us doing that. Also, Secretary of State Greg Amore, champion right now, defender of the American way and of justice and the people and self-governance right now, because the Trump administration's trying to basically take state voter information that they're not supposed to have access to. The details I'm going to need to review again. Actually, I can just pull it up right now. But he is resisting them at his own peril. So that is awesome. Let's pull up an article about that real quick. Greg Amore sued Trump administration. In fact, let's watch a video. People like watching videos, don't they? We love
Rhode Island,
don't we, folks? Let me see. Do I have... And... right screen. Good.
Tonight, we're hearing from Rhode Island Secretary of State Greg Amore.
Thank you. I'm _Justin_02 for following the stream. I forgot that my alert box was me doing a reverse Falcon punch on Brett, who was playing Gabriel. That's very amusing. Thank you for reminding me of that memory, and also thank you for following the stream on Twitch. Yes, thank you, Twitch viewer. Anyway.
After he and his office were sued by the Trump administration.
They were sued over their refusal to hand state voter records to the federal government.
State voter
Caleb
records.
Fish.
Whoa, hold on. Why is my webcam? Oh, I know why. Wait, do I know why? I think I know why. Oh, you know what it is? It's underneath. Anyway, let's get my beautiful face on there again. Okay, listen. All right.
Spoke with Amore and joins us with what he's saying about the lawsuit.
Well, Secretary of State Greg Amore tells me he's not surprised by this lawsuit. In fact, he says he was expecting it. He tells me he believes his office did nothing wrong, and they're prepared to defend their actions in court.
It's very clear to us that this is an attempt to undermine confidence in our elections.
Rhode Island's Secretary of State now in a legal battle with the Trump administration. It started back in September when the Department of Justice asked Greg Amore to hand over the entirety of Rhode Island's voter registration file,
which includes personal information, last 4 digits of the Social Security number and driver's license numbers.
So that same month, Amore denied their request, which he called unconstitutional.
And he's right too. We need people who are tougher. We need Democrats who are tough. By the way, nonpartisan organization, but I'm just saying, given everything that's going on, Jesus, like the same guy who tried to basically call the election he lost in 2020 stolen, the same faction who tried to bully the company that made the voting machines and then were caught lying about it, and then when sued had to settle. And then Tucker Carlson going and saying, well, actually, you can't sue me too. I'm not liable. Obviously, my show is just opinion. No one would ever take it seriously. That was basically his legal defense. Those same guys now want everyone's voter records. The states have the right to run their elections. That is not the job of the federal government. So good on them for sticking to their guns and fighting back against this.
Really unusual request because it's not specific. There's no cause involved in this request.
Fast forward to Tuesday when the Trump administration sued Amore and his office over their decision not to comply with the DOJ's request. According to court records, the DOJ asked for the info to make sure Rhode Island was in line with federal law around voter list maintenance. The Justice Department pledged to keep that information secure in accordance with federal privacy laws.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll keep our voter information very secure with all the Russians and Qataris running around running around where they're not supposed to be.
The feds argue Amore's refusal to hand over the info broke the law. He disagrees, saying he did so in part to protect voters' privacy.
And we don't know where this information is going. We don't know if it'll be shared. And so we take that responsibility seriously, and we believe it's in violation of federal law. The Privacy Act of 1974 prevents us from handing over this information and prevents the federal government from requesting it.
Similar lawsuits have been filed against secretaries of state in other parts of the country, which is why Amore told 12 News he was anticipating the legal action. He says voters have nothing to worry about.
We're in compliance with all federal and state law around voter list maintenance. In fact, we're proud of the work we've done. And I would tell Rhode Islanders that their elections are secure, they're fair.
Now, Amore tells me...
And you can tell that the Trump administration's suit is basically in bad faith because they didn't even give a reason why they would have a concern to subpoena those records or a specific rationale for the request or like targeted request. They just want everything. Very, very suspicious.
Attorney General Peter Nerona will be defending him and his office in court. He told me he's not aware of an exact timeline of how things will play out moving forward. Inside the State House in Providence, I'm Kayla Fish, 12 News.
Well, let's pull up an article too. Let me see here. Greg Amore sued. That's an activist website. What about well, Projo is paid, so I probably can't read this article, can I? Oh no. I think I got it. It was only a matter of time before the US Department of Justice, chat up, under President Donald Trump would add Rhode Island to the list of states it is suing for refusal to hand over personal information such as Social Security and driver's license numbers on the state's voter rolls. And now it has happened. On Tuesday, December 2nd, Secretary of State Greg Amore confirmed that the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division had filed a lawsuit against Rhode Island. In his statement, Amore said the lawsuit, like those filed in other states, is a continuation of the current presidential administration's unconstitutional attempts to interfere with the elections processes all across the country. Let me wet my whistle. I denied the Department of Justice's unsubstantiated request for Rhode Islanders' private information because the administration of elections falls under the purview of the states under the United States Constitution, Amore said. One of my most important responsibilities as the chief state election official is safeguarding the data privacy of Rhode Islanders who entrust us with their personal information when they register to vote. I will continue to fight to protect it. What does the lawsuit say? The lawsuit arises from the Attorney General's investigation into Rhode Island's compliance with federal election laws, according to the complaint. One of those laws prohibits states from processing voter registration applications without obtaining and verifying certain identifying information from the applicant, according to the filing. On September 8th, the DOJ demanded Rhode Island turn over a computerized statewide voter list that contains all fields, including the full name, birth date, residential address, state's driver's license number, and the last 4 digits of each registered voter's social security number. Oh, shit. I didn't realize. Hold on. I didn't realize that my gamer tag was there. What to do? Hold on, I got this. Aha! There. Much better. Gotcha, Joe. On September 16th, 2025, Amore sent a return letter that said he would be pleased to voluntarily provide a copy of the publicly available voter registration list, but I must protect the personally identifiable information of Rhode Island voters. He said he would not, without a demonstration of proper legal basis or a court order, provide the personally identifiable information the federal agency is seeking, including the state driver's license number and the last four digits of the social security, I feel like Dan Saltman, number of each registered voter. His refusal was described this way in the federal government's filing. Through the 17th you would know how funny that joke is if you knew who Dan Saltman was. Through the September 16th letter, Secretary Amore refused the Attorney General's written demand made through her representative, the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights. Made through his representative, did they mean? Oh, no, the Attorney General's written demand. Excuse me, Pam Bondi. In the filing, the federal government asked the U.S. District Court to order Amore to provide the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights an electronic copy of Rhode Island's statewide voter registration list within 5 days. That includes all the denied information. The ACLU of Rhode Island called the lawsuit a major threat to the privacy of Rhode Island voters. Oh my goodness. I forgot more of them. Got it. All right, I got the rest of it. The branding is removed. In the file, his refusal was described this way in the federal government's filing. Through the September 16th letter, Secretary Amore refused the Attorney General's written demand made through her representative, the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights. In the filing, the federal government asked the U.S. District Court to order Amore to provide the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights an electronic copy of Rhode Island's statewide voter registration list within 5 days. That includes all of the denied information. The ACLU of Rhode Island called the lawsuit a major threat to the privacy of Rhode Island voters. The ACLU commends Secretary of State Amore for refusing to voluntarily turn over this information, and we are hopeful that the courts will be protective of Rhode Islanders' privacy rights as the suit moves forward. Like the outrageous activities of Doge during the first months of the Trump administration, this latest attempt to collect enormous amounts of data should be a concern to anyone who wants to prevent the misuse of personal information by the federal government. Remember when Doge was going into classified areas and taking classified information without being cleared to do so? Also, I was trying to X out that thing, but it opened something else. Nice. Our first guest of today. His name is Richard Hite. He is the author of an amazing book called In the Shadow of Salem, The Andover Witch Hunt of 1692. He was actually, funny story, the first speaker at the first Rhode Island Atheist event I ever went to. It was very interesting. It was a very interesting introduction to this organization. Richard, are you with us?
Yes, I am. I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, and I apologize for my confusion. Apparently, I put the start time of the show an hour before it was actually supposed to start, which is a
Right. I just heard you talking about that.
Oops. You ever done something like that?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So now, some of the questions I wanted to ask you. For example, what sparked your interest in the Salem witch trials in particular to the point where you wrote a book about it?
Well, I've had an interest in it really since I was a child. My sister told me about it when I was elementary school age. And then one of those opportunities that came along to order books for kids in an elementary school class. I ordered one titled The Devil's Shadow, which was by an author named Clifford Lindsay Alderman, who I know nothing about otherwise, but it was, a book for young readers about the witchcraft trials. So I got that and read it. Then, like any number of others, of course, I read the play The Crucible in high school. Um, and I wrote a couple of term papers on the subject in graduate school. Then in, 2003, I moved to Rhode Island, and, I had close proximity to the places involved. So, I started visiting them and reading up on them more. When I did those term papers in the 1980s, I read every major work on the subject that had been published up to that time. And then when I got started reading it again, I caught up on that, so to speak, because of course more books had come out about it since then.
Right. Yeah, I actually remember the Crucible. I did well in my sophomore year. They had a unit on the Crucible. We did the book, we did the movie, we did it all, and it was funny because at that time I'd only left religion. I left religion in 7th grade. So and then
Mhm.
we were studying the Crucible in 10th grade. So it was a thing where at first I kind of hesitantly left religion. But it's one of those
Sure.
things where I didn't have any political beliefs or anything at the time until maybe 10th or 11th grade, but later on in 10th grade or something. But it was one of those things where the more I learned about the history and the more I learned about things that had happened, I was like, wow, maybe I made the right choice. They were murdering people because they thought the devil was possessing them or whatever. Very interesting stuff. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
Uh, um, what caught your attention about specifically the witch hunt in Andover, and what inspired you to give that story its own comprehensive treatment?
Well, I had learned some time ago that 45 people in Andover were arrested on witchcraft charges, which was more than any other town in the region, including the town of Salem itself, and also the area known as Salem Village, which is currently the town of Danvers. And Dan, modern day Danvers was where it all started. But I was noticing in all the books I was reading, Andover, if mentioned at all, was just kind of mentioned in passing as if it was some kind of a sideshow, not really
Right,
important.
right,
And I found myself thinking, there had to be, something going on in Andover to that led to all this large number of people getting accused. Because yes, people were accused all over northeastern Massachusetts, but
right,
there were any number of towns where just maybe just one person or maybe two or three people were accused. And here was Andover account with 45. That's slightly less than a third of the total who were accused during that whole time period, which extended really from the accusations ran from February to November of 1692.
gotcha.
So,
Interesting.
mhm.
Okay, awesome. And how did opposition to the witch hunt in Andover play out in that community? Did the people who started opposing the witch hunt start getting accused and persecuted themselves while they were trying to fight back against what was going on?
It turned out no. They did. The ones who did, the ones who began the opposition did not end up being accused, although they certainly had reason to fear that possibility.
Right, right.
One thing that stands out about Andover is that nearly everyone of the 45 there who were arrested, 38 of them actually confessed to it.
Wow.
Now, what happened, one of their ministers, Francis Dane, who had opposed the whole thing from the beginning, noted in a letter that a rumor started in Andover that if you confessed to witchcraft, that your life would be spared. Now, it did turn out that way, but it was just an accident of timing. It's, the scene that played out in the Crucible when John Proctor considers confessing and can't bring himself to do it, to say that's pure fiction.
Gotcha.
There was every intention of trying those who confessed later. They were being kept alive at the time to offer evidence against the ones who were being brought to trial.
Right.
But what finally in September of 1692, they began trying some of the people who had confessed. They had more than enough confessors by that time that they didn't need them all anymore. That created alarm in Andover because the family members there had been encouraging their loved ones to confess, and now they realized, oops, this may not spare them.
Jesus. Yeah.
So they started altogether 72 people in Andover signed signed at least one of 4 petitions that circulated defending the suspects. And yes, it was a risk, but by that time, the last hangings happened on September 22nd. Several people who had confessed had been convicted, and but they were given, because they confessed, they were being given more time to make their peace with God, so to speak.
Right.
But there was every reason to think they might be hanged in October. However, the opposition was growing elsewhere. The minister Increase Mather, for instance, penned a detailed write-up, questioning the validity of the whole thing. The governor suspended all legal action in October, and then disbanded the court he had created. A new court was created to start trying people in January, but the standards were much more stringent, and no one was hanged after that time. But opposing it was risky. But by the time the opposition started at Andover, as it turned out, they were not persecuted.
Gotcha. I wish we could just like drop a modern day like social science or a psychologist there to analyze the behavior. It's like a very advanced form of, I don't know. It's crazy to think about what it would be like to be in that situation or to have people acting that way around you. But anyway, there's a note in the Journal of 18th Century Studies about you challenging Boyer's and Nissenbaum's view of the Salem witch trials being born out of factionalism. Can you explain your disagreement with them for the uninitiated who don't understand what that's all about?
Okay, well, the note there does not, does not get the point that I was making precisely.
Oh, okay.
See, the book that I'm referring to that described factionalism was specifically focused on Salem Village, modern day Danvers, which is where the whole 1692 episode started. Yeah. And they discuss some factionalism in that particular location. And for Salem Village, I agree with them. I think they were right. What I said was that as I began my research on Andover, I expected to find a similar type of factionalism in Andover.
Right.
For one thing, the town of Andover had already been informally divided into north and south ends. And see, what I was expecting to find was a situation of maybe finding the accusers coming from one end of town and the accused predominantly from another section of town, because that was kind of how things played out in Salem Village. It was people in the more western, more rural areas who generally supported their minister, right. Who were more often the accusers, and the eastern part of the village, closer to the town of Salem, who were more often accused. But at Salem Village, I think that was valid. In Andover, though, it did not turn out that way at all. There were almost an equal number of accusers and accused from each end of town.
Interesting.
Andover had 2 ministers at the time. Francis Dane was the older one. He was and he was in his 70s by this time, not preaching so much anymore. They had hired a younger minister, Thomas Barnard, to eventually take over. I knew Francis Dane had opposed the whole thing from the beginning. Now, some historians, without really looking at it, were concluding that Thomas Barnard was maybe the leading zealot who was supporting the thing, and that I thought maybe factions lined up behind both of them. Well, again, that turned out not to be the case. Thomas Barnard was no more comfortable with the process than Francis Dane was.
Interesting.
In fact, throughout the whole thing, with a few exceptions, the ministers were not leading the charge here. Samuel Parris, the minister in Salem Village, wholeheartedly supported it. Nicholas Noyes in Salem supported it. John Hale in Beverly, the town of Beverly, supported it, but most of the ministers were uncomfortable throughout the whole thing.
Interesting.
Yes, but it turns out, Thomas Barnard he wasn't as outspoken against it as Francis Dane, but then again, members of Dane's own family were being accused. Thomas Barnard's family was not touched. But nonetheless, he signed the petitions defending the suspects along with Francis Dane. And it became apparent later that, members of people and family members of those accused had a very high opinion of Thomas Barnard, which wouldn't have been the case if he had been, leading the charge on the witchcraft trials, so to speak. So it was, yeah, what did kind of play out in Andover more so than anywhere else is that once one member of a family was accused, others were likely to follow.
Right.
Martha Carrier was the first person from Andover to be accused, and when you look at her entire extended family, when you get into not only her sister of hers who was accused, but and her own children and nieces and nephews. She had cousins accused. She was related to Francis Dane by marriage. He was the husband. He was the husband of her aunt, and so ultimately 17 members of her extended family, who was also Francis Dane's extended family, were accused.
Goodness.
She was the only one who ended up being hanged. But
the rest of them made it to October or whenever it was when the whole thing kind of collapsed.
By October, it kind of collapsed. May, it was still going strong in May. Now, Martha Carrier was the first person accused in Andover, as I noted, but things didn't really take off in Andover until July. She was accused in May, but it was somebody, Joseph Ballard of Andover, whose wife was quite ill, at the prompting of some of his neighbors, invited two of the afflicted girls from what was Salem Village to examine his wife to determine whether or not she was bewitched. Well, not surprisingly, they said yes.
Right.
And that was when things touched off in Andover.
Yeah. By the way, when you said that it was a minority of so a majority of ministers were uncomfortable, were you referring specifically to Andover, Salem, or both?
Oh, the whole region.
Yeah.
Not just Salem and Andover. I mean, both in Andover were uncomfortable with the proceedings. Increase Mather was throughout. I mean, Cotton Mather kind of sat on the fence. He's often been portrayed as a leading zealot. His role in the whole thing has been over Hite. But ministers throughout, some of them were being quiet, but they were not, really, with the exception of Samuel Parris in Salem Village, they were not leading the charge, so to speak.
Interesting. So
Yeah.
would you say it was like a minority of ministers who were pushing this, or was it you said in Salem it was the rural people against the less rural, the more city-centered people in the east?
Yes, to some degree, because the people in the eastern part had more commercial ties to Salem town, better economic opportunities. The book by Paul Boyer and Stephen Niesenbaum points this out. The ones in the western part of the village, were mostly, strictly farmers. They didn't have access to, the economic opportunities to Salem Village. Of Salem town. Excuse me. And so they just those people more staunchly supported the minister Samuel Parris, whereas those and with the stronger commercial ties to Salem town tended to be more in opposition to him, because he just there was just something about his personality. He did not he had a problematic personality in some ways, and one thing that is noteworthy about Salem Village is that they had not yet acknowledged the so-called halfway covenant, which dated back to the 1660s, when the halfway covenant allowed people whose parents were not church members to potentially become partial church members, so to speak.
Okay.
Because there were fewer and fewer people who were eligible to be full church members. That's of course an entirely different story, so I won't get too deeply into that.
Right.
But in certain ways, Salem Village was behind the times.
Interesting. Do you think a lot of this, like, so for Andover, you say it wasn't as much the factionalism as it was in Salem. For Salem,
Exactly.
do you think it was jealousy at the people who had more economic opportunity that spurned this sort of accusations of Satanism or demonic witchcraft, things like that?
To some degree, yes. I mean, it wasn't just um, yeah, I mean, I don't. It's you have to be careful at how you phrase that. There was
Right.
certainly jealousy involved, but there was a lot of things were going on throughout the region at the time that were quite problematic. The charter of the Massachusetts Bay Colony had been revoked in 1684 by King Charles II. James II, who succeeded him as king, he was not Charles's son, he was his brother. Charles, although he had 23 illegitimate children, had no legitimate children.
Right.
So none of his children were eligible to become the reigning monarch.
Yeah.
James was openly Catholic. He created the so-called Dominion of New England, which included not only all the New England colonies, but New York and New Jersey as well. Placed it under a crony of his, Edmund Andros, who started charging taxes that were never taxed before. Of course, he was then forced out when, at the time, 1688, with the so-called Glorious Revolution in England, when James II was ousted in favor of his daughter and son-in-law, William and Mary.
Yeah.
And but that left Massachusetts without any real means of governance because the charter had been revoked and it hadn't been replaced. So there were, and then aside from that, winters were unusually harsh at the time. The early 1690s had some of the harshest winters of the 17th century. And aside from that, war had broken out again with the Native Americans north of there in the frontier areas of what is today Maine.
Yeah.
It was a carryover from warfare in Europe. England and France had gone to war again, and so the French had incited their Native American allies in what is today Canada to attack the settlements in the English colonies.
Right.
So so people were looking for scapegoats, and the assumption of a large number of people was, well, God, as it would be when things are going wrong in that era, God is angry at us for some reason.
Yeah.
And so they began thinking, well, people are probably, going in league with the devil, and therefore so God is punishing all of us because of this. And so, if you had a quarrel with somebody or what have you, that angry at or some thought that someone was angry with you, you might think, okay, maybe they're a suspect.
Gotcha. Now, how would you personally respond to a fundamentalist Christian who today believes the witch trials happened because of an actual epidemic of witchcraft?
Well, I think I would start by pointing out, that the average person at that era believed in witchcraft.
Right.
And if you honestly believe in something, you are going to start to experience,
Of course.
you can likely experience some of the symptoms of it. Like some of the young girls, I mean, it was mostly young girls who were, from their, prepubescent to early adolescence who were claiming affliction.
Yeah.
But the general way that people were thought to practice witchcraft and bring harm to someone was possibly through creating puppets and, either squeezing them or sticking them with something and imagining the person you want to harm.
Yeah.
If you believe in that sort of thing and you believe it really will work, and you find out or suspect someone's doing that with you, you can experience the actual symptoms.
Right.
But they're psychosomatic. They're not organic in any way.
Yeah.
That's a part of it. And the other thing we have, of course, if you have those kinds of beliefs, you're likely going to experience some pretty extreme nightmares because of it. I have no doubt that some of the so-called, the alleged attacks by witches that were talked about came to people in nightmares. There's much, and in a time like that, I'm sure more people believed in that era that nightmares were actually some manifestation of reality. We have to remember that, you know, uh, the world was much, darker in that era. And I'm not talking about, a mental status. I'm talking about literally, physically darker.
Yeah,
And when the sun went down, your only light was fire.
exactly.
If you had reason to go out in dark, unless you were carrying a torch or something, you could, you're not. There's no street lights.
Spooky stuff.
Spooky stuff, and when there's a lot of things that have since been explained by science that people don't that were not known in that era. Another thing I often think about is correct. Okay, I wear glasses. All kinds of people today wear, have corrective vision in some way. Now, corrective vision goes back, corrective lenses go back much further than that, but they were generally only available to the elite.
Of course.
I often think that had to be any number of people in that era who had vision problems
Yeah.
that they could do absolutely nothing about because they had no access to the means.
Right.
And in that time period, how many people thought they saw something that they really didn't see, or misunderstood what they saw simply because they had poor vision.
Exactly.
I often think of that, in the description of some of the things that are described in the Bible or in earlier writings of that era. Is that how much of it came out of simply, poor vision that people had no means to do anything about?
Yeah. That makes sense. As somebody wears glasses themselves, I can imagine that. Um, do you see any modern parallels to what took place in the witch trials? And does it remind you of what played out during, for example, McCarthyism a bit more recently? And do you see us in the future experiencing phenomenon like this?
I think we're going through something like it right now.
Exactly. And
To
can
be
you
honest,
elaborate? Yeah.
sure. Well, I already talked about some of the things that were going wrong at that time and people looking for scapegoats. And while the things that a lot of the things that people see as going wrong now are not as real as what was talked about then. Okay, I think back to the era of the Obama administration.
Right.
Um, I think that a large number of people were frightened by the fact that an African American could actually be elected as president of the United States.
Yep.
And then, of course, there's also, so there was also the fact that there was a lot of talk then that by the year 2050 that we will be a majority minority country. I mean, people of European background may, by that point, still form the largest group, but it would no longer be a majority. I think people were frightened by that. And then, of course, things happened during the Obama years, like same sex couples obtained the right to marry,
Yep.
and their rights advanced in other ways. A number of people were, I think, very frightened by that, and so there was a longing to go back to it. And then you have somebody like Donald Trump come along. Now, he didn't really speak out much against the gay community. By the second, during his term, he began speaking out much more against the trans community.
Yeah.
But people were looking for scapegoats. Okay, he comes up with immigrants from Latin American countries. After all, the more of them who come in, the closer we're coming to a majority minority country. And I think that so they became the scapegoats to a large degree. So I definitely see a parallel to modern times in that regard.
And it's very interesting you brought up Obama and then Trump. Trump basically kickstarted the whole birther conspiracy against Obama, right? Well, he's African
Yes.
American. He has a strange last name. Oh, he must be secret. What was it? Kenyan Muslim? I don't remember the specifics, but yeah.
Well, but I think he said both, but he specifically said he was born in Kenya, which is where I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that is where Obama's father was from.
Right. Interesting.
But but we've had any number of presidents who've had a parent born in another country. Well, Trump himself, his mother was from Scotland.
Yeah. Drumpf was the original last name, was it? If I remember correctly?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it would have been Trump is probably really how the D the letter D in German sounds much the way they pronounce it. It sounds much closer to a T than it does for us.
Yeah.
Very often, if we hear a German talking, we're not going to be able to tell the difference.
Yeah.
I've spent, I've studied German to some degree, not fluent in it by any means, but I've been there a number of times. But that is, and yes, and that on that side of his family, yeah, his grandparents were German on his father's side.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there again, his ancestors, though, recent arrivals in the United States were from from European countries, not from Africa.
Right. Exactly.
And so,
yeah. It's very interesting. Trump actually has we were talking about scapegoats. Trump has a long history of scapegoating people. I remember the Central Park Five. There was like 5 black men in Central Park who were being tried for, or maybe even convicted of a crime they didn't commit, and then they were later released. They were acquitted of, that murder or whatever it was. And then Trump was,
yeah,
even after they were acquitted, saying, no, send them back. No, it's definitely them. Yeah, it's
yes,
he has a long history of that.
that is very true.
Yeah. When did you decide you wanted to be an author?
Well, it was, I never really, it was not so much deciding I wanted to be an author because, it's not, certainly I don't support my main means of support is, my, is my job. I mean, I've barely made a month's salary off this book.
Right.
So, but, there were just things I felt, I wanted, I felt like I had something to offer, in terms of history. And this is not the first book I've written. The other, this is the best known, but I've written other books that were genealogy related. That's been a hobby of mine since I was in high school. And in that case, I wanted to, because there's so much bad information out there on that, I wanted to rectify it as best I could. It was just to get word out about some things. Get my, give people a chance to see my own perspective.
If you don't mind me asking, what is your main job?
Oh, I work at the Rhode Island State Archives.
Oh,
So
right,
my
I knew
job
that. Yeah.
is coordinator, and so I work with state agencies on their records to a large degree.
That's interesting. Um,
Mhm.
yeah. So I guess, well, you're not necessarily like you're being an author isn't supporting you, but you do seem to have a big interest in history because you work at the Rhode Island State Archives. What sparked your interest in history? I think you said that since you were a child, you were interested in the Salem witch trial. So,
Yeah.
was that the initial spark for I like history, I
Well,
like reading about it?
it wasn't the very first history topic I became interested in. You see, I can pretty specifically pinpoint the interest in history, and that the first presidential election I remember was 1968. That was the year Nixon was elected to his first term. And I remember seeing a cover of a picture of a large number. It was some kind of artist rendering of all the previous presidents of the United States. And I was talking to my parents about it, and then my dad got out our World Book encyclopedias and took me to the page where that named all the presidents.
Nice.
And I started. Each one had his own entry in the World Book Encyclopedia. I started reading a lot of those. I was kind of an advanced reader for my age, I guess.
Nice. That's awesome.
Because I was the 1968 election literally happened on my 7th birthday.
Wow. That's
And
fun.
so, and then my dad at the time was a huge Nixon supporter, so I kind of got brainwashed.
Oh no. Gotcha.
But besides that, as a 7-year-old child, you like the idea of having the same first name as the president.
Of course. Yeah,
And
that's
so,
very. I could be
uh,
the next one, kind of a thing.
yeah, yeah. And then, but then, I started developing an interest in other things, like, a number of kids, an early interest is military history. I became very interested in both the Revolutionary War and the Civil War.
Right.
And then but then, the Salem witchcraft trials thing was only kind of a side interest at the time, although because I didn't read a lot of detail about that until really I got to college. One of my history classes had us read a book on it, and then as an undergrad, and then it was in grad school I wrote the term papers. But I kind of drifted away from history. I guess when I was in my teens, I got more interested in sports. But then it was actually in high school that when my dad and I started working on our family history, and the more we got into it, the more I realized I had family ties to a lot of the topics in history that I had been interested in anyway. So it kind of reawakened my interest in history, so to speak.
That's really awesome. It's a really awesome story. Um, by the way, what is it like working for the Rhode Island State Archives, and how does that help you with your research for topics that you're interested in, like this?
Well, I mean, of course, I work most of my direct responsibilities involve records that have been created now or within the last,
Oh,
couple of
gotcha.
decades.
Right, makes sense.
And so, and I've always, as far as history is concerned, I've always been much more interested in earlier times. I've never done research too many 20th century topics.
Okay.
But nonetheless, having it available. I mean, I don't do personal research in the archives. Uh, if I end up ever writing on any kind of Rhode Island related topic, it will be after I retire,
Okay.
um, which
Interesting.
is
Do you have
probably
any
at
in
this
mind?
point. Not Rhode Island specific, no. For one thing, see, I should point this out about Rhode Island is that it's, as far as there were never any witchcraft trials in Rhode Island,
Based.
and in the one that the previous one, well, prior to Salem, the largest outbreak had been in the area of Hartford, Connecticut, in 1662 and 1663. I think 11 people were accused, 8 were tried, 4 were convicted, and all of those convicted were hanged. But
Jeez.
some of the ones who were accused at that time actually fled to Rhode Island to escape persecution.
Huh.
Rhode Island was a very religiously diverse colony from the very beginning.
Which maybe it protected it from that kind of mass. Uh, I don't know what to call it. Hysteria. Like
Yeah,
yeah,
I think
probably
it did
layer.
because
Yeah.
there were witchcraft trials in Connecticut as well, and Connecticut, although it began being settled just a few years after Massachusetts, but in a lot of ways it was an outgrowth of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. The people, a lot of people, the early settlers of Connecticut had been in Massachusetts for a few years first, and more land became available in what's today the Connecticut, and so a number of the earliest settlers had lived in Rhode Island a few years. That eventually, of course, New Haven also became a port, so people would go directly to New Haven. And New Haven at one time was actually a separate colony from the colony of Connecticut. I
Huh.
don't think that lasted very long.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
It's just like what's today southeastern Massachusetts was at one time the colony of Plymouth. It was only merged with Massachusetts Bay in the charter of 1692. So we have 6 states crammed into a very small area today, but it could history taken a slightly different course. We could have 8. There could be a state today called Plymouth. There could be one called New Haven.
That's crazy to think about.
Yeah, New Haven, I think, is less likely because I think it constituted just most of what is today the town of New Haven and maybe a few towns immediately around it. But Plymouth constituted all of southeastern Massachusetts. If it was a separate state, it would be larger than Rhode Island.
Massive. Yeah. Interesting. Oh,
Hmm.
wow. Well,
So,
working on any new books?
well, I've just mentioned, my interest in genealogy. And the book I wrote before this was called, as a number of stories get passed down in families verbally that people take as gospel.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, when you actually start doing research into it, you find out that those things aren't true. For instance, my father, I grew up believing, and my father grew up believing the same thing, that the origin of our last name was Dutch and that our ancestors were from the Netherlands. When it turned out, when we researched it, no, it wasn't the Netherlands. They were from modern day Germany.
Huh.
Um, and that's not at all unusual, but there's any number, and so the title of the book was Sustainable Genealogy, Separating Fact from Fiction and Family Legends. Well, I was just been talking to the publisher of that book, and because, of course, with the use of the internet and genealogy, all kinds of things that are not true are being being posted on people's family trees on the internet.
Yeah.
So,
Huh.
because if you have an account with Ancestry.com or any of the others, you can post anything there.
And it might not
Um,
be accurate.
right. I mean, some people, probably just some people could just make up things if they wanted to.
Yeah.
A cousin of mine called them and complained about some wrong information someone had posted on his family, and not the ancestors he and I have in common, but but they told him, people, they can't do anything about what people post on there. And he asked them, he said, so if I was to post on a tree that Jesus Christ was the son of Abraham Lincoln, and Abraham Lincoln was the son of Satan, you wouldn't do anything about it? And they told him no.
That's funny. Oh no.
So anyway, so I'm probably going. I'm going to start, putting together the outline and working on what will essentially be a sequel to that. That will, but discuss, trying to separate fact from fiction on internet postings, because what, it only takes one person to post one wrong piece of information, and a number of other people will just start copying it. So it ends up proliferating all over the place.
Of course. Well,
And so,
yep.
uh, but I'll probably write, like I say, I'm about 3 years away from retirement. I'll probably write more after that time.
Yeah, you'll have more
But
time to do what you really love to do. It's always good.
exactly. And, I intend to continue living here, but I'll probably spend fairly significant um, amounts of time in other areas. I don't have any kids of my own, and I have one sister. She and all of her children live on the West Coast now, so I may spend large chunks of time out there too.
Yeah, I lived in Portland, Oregon for 1 year as a kid. Seemed like an interesting thing. I might go visit there myself sometimes. West Coast is
Oh yeah,
interesting.
I've been to Portland a couple of times. It's great. I have a niece who lives in Seattle, which isn't terribly far away from there. And then my sister and some of the others live in California. She lives in the Bay Area along with one of her kids, and
Interesting.
the other one lives in Santa Barbara, and there's also one in Las Vegas. So
That's awesome.
I'm really, except for one grandnephew who lives in South Carolina, I'm the only one left in the East Coast anymore, even though we grew up in North Carolina.
Oh yeah. I went to North Carolina for an internship. I only know Greenville, so there.
Oh yeah, East Carolina University is there, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that was
Yeah,
where I was.
yeah. I grew up in a small, very rural community outside of Fayetteville, and then went to college in both Chapel Hill and Raleigh.
N- Nice. Well, Richard Hite, thank you for talking to me today. Now, I believe people can find your book at westhomepublishing.com. Um,
Yes.
is there any other places where people can find your work or find you or the things that you do?
Well, I don't have a website or anything. I probably, should get someone to make one for me, but I guess it's but of course the book's been out a while now. There are undoubtedly used copies available through both ABE Books and Amazon. I typically use ABE Books because it's specifically book oriented.
Yeah.
And so there are there are a couple of places in Salem that sell them. The Salem Witch Museum, Salem Historical Tours is one. I actually lead tours that for them. Maybe five. Usually about 5 times a year, in Salem, and also in in the old cemetery in North Andover, along with the retired director of the North Andover Historical Society. I should point out the town, what is today North Andover, is
Yeah.
actually the oldest part of what was the town of Andover.
Yeah.
The town formally split in 1855. Now, so what the town I write about is Andover covered a much larger area than constitutes simply Andover today.
Yeah.
It included both of those towns plus parts of what is today Lawrence, Massachusetts. Um, and so, but although people were settling in what is today Andover, by that time, that constitutes most of what I call the south end of Andover. But yeah, the North Andover Historical Society has copies of my book. Um, and a lot is another place. I don't know of any other place in there or Andover that carries it for sure. Some might. It was released in paperback 2 years ago. It had been strictly hardback prior to that.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time today. Again, I'm sorry for the initial confusion and the interruption of your breakfast, but yes,
Oh, that was okay. Yes, I told Joe I tend to sleep very late on weekends, so I
yeah.
start my day kind of late. But I was what confused. I see. I thought it because of the time. I thought at first that what you were doing was a test,
Oh yeah.
and
It probably should have been. That would have been good, wasn't it? Ah, man.
but that so that's why I was caught off guard initially when you started asking me questions that time.
Yeah, there must have been like earlier discussions about times, and I must have just
Uh-huh.
not updated my phone calendar or something. Even though
Oh,
literally a few days ago I recorded a promo and said 12 p.m. I was like, "Oh,
yeah.
phone 11 a.m. Gotcha. All right, good."
Okay.
Oh no. Yeah. Uh,
Okay. Well, hey, thank you for the opportunity.
no
And
problem.
let me put in another plug here, if I may.
Yeah.
There is a documentary in the works called "The Last Witch." It refers mainly to Elizabeth, a young woman named Elizabeth Johnson, she was convicted of witchcraft in 1692. She was from Andover, but she was not. She was one of the ones who was convicted but not hanged.
Yeah.
And one of the things I learned in my research was that although everyone else who was convicted, whether hanged or not, had been formally exonerated of the charges, she never had been.
Oh,
So, I communicated with some people in North Andover and met a teacher at the middle school there, and their students launched a project to get her formally exonerated by the Massachusetts General Assembly, and that happened in 2022.
that's awesome.
There's a documentary in the works titled "The Last Witch,"
The last
which
witch. Nice.
in fact, next weekend I'm going to be, I've already recorded quite a bit for them. I'm going to be meeting with them next weekend. I think the likely time that will come out is in about 2027.
Huh.
So, you
Interesting.
know, uh, yeah. So I just wanted to make you aware of that was going on.
Thank you for making me aware of that. Awesome. Yeah. Can't
Hmm.
wait for it.
Yeah, I can't either. So,
All right. Well, thank you. Enjoy your lovely Sunday afternoon and whatever seasonal festivities or family get-togethers you have planned. I hope they're great.
thank you. Same to you.
All right. Thank you. And
Hmm.
adios.
Adios.
All right. Awesome. Now, does anyone in any audience, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Kick? We couldn't get on TikTok because we don't have 1,000 followers on there yet. Does anyone? I don't like the way that it shows that. Anyway, does anyone want to come in here and ask questions or comment? Anyone from the There. Oh yeah, we have a Discord that you could call into. Oh yeah, I was talking about how my 10th grade high school class, we did a unit on the Crucible and on the Salem witch trials. I'm trying to think, did I know about the witch trials before that year? Probably, right? You would think so. I wonder if my Catholic school talked about it. Do you think they talked about it? But I was writing a writing piece for that same class. That lady was the then principal's wife. I remember that. She seemed nice, all right. But the one thing I remember is that I was writing about why I had become an atheist in 7th grade, like 3 years prior. And I wrote that it was once I thought about it for more than 5 minutes, it became very obvious to me that this isn't a thing that people believed because it was true or because there was a guy in the sky or because they had a reason to believe. It was because they adopted the set of beliefs because mommy and daddy told them it was true and their mommy and daddy told them it was true and that the idea was that it had nothing to do with people knowing what they were saying was true. They inherited the set of beliefs and just didn't question it. And I do remember, God rest her soul. No, she's still around, I'm sure. I remember the teacher's comment on the paper. She didn't take points off. She was just commenting like personally. She was like, "Well, that's what makes it a family tradition." And I'm like, "But that's the problem. It's not about what's true." Oh God, you just do it because it's like a social game being played, or it's like a thing. It's like you're making a group that you belong to where you worship a sky god and you worship the same book that was written by people who, you know, didn't know where the sun went at night. So that's kind of awkward. But that's just me. That was just me. That was my thought process when I initially got out of it. It was like, oh wait, huh? I just happened to be born by chance into the family with a correct religion. I don't think so. I think this smells like bullshit. And when you're in the 7th grade and you're asking yourself that question, it is so much easier to just shove the doubts away and to ignore them because you get every reward for doing that. You're still tight with the religious people in your family. Well, not that you can't be, but it's easier. You're still in the in group. You have the community at church that you can be a part of. We have very easy answers to every question in your life, your moral question that you don't ever have to actually think about because all the answers were handed to you. You have the comfort of the idea that you're going to a very special place after you die and you don't just stop existing. And then your reward for throwing away religion and being an atheist is nothing, really, unfortunately. Except, well, nothing immediately, but it's the long-term thing. Whereas once you do it and then you continue to live your life, you continue to see the reasons why it was a good thing. Because imagine I was still a Catholic person and I had become convinced by whatever line and whatever dumbass book in the Bible said that man cannot lay with another man, and now I hate gay people. Like, I'm friends with gay people. One of my closer friends right now is a trans man. Like, if I didn't respect these people's identities, I wouldn't have those friends. It's like I wouldn't even know these people. I'd probably be adversarial with them. That would kind of suck, right? I'm like, and then there's the moral thing where I would just be a less moral person. I would be judgmental of people because of their identity or because of the people they loved. I would think that they're going to it's all those things. But when you're making the decision, all you see is the short term, oh, it's uncomfortable. So obviously when you're a kid, most likely you're not going to do it. Of course, I'm a stubborn asshole, so I did it anyway because I wanted to be right. I cared more about what was right than was comfortable with all the people around me. I didn't care about that, but that was just me being particular. Rationalization is better than letting books written thousands of years ago dictate your life. Exactly, and that's why when I was wait, how old was I in 7th grade? Was it 12, 11? When I was that age, I was like, this. all smacks of bullshit. And it came not very long after my super religious spurt of activity, where in 6th grade I was like, fuck it, I believe in this religion, right? You know, I'm not in the Catholic school anymore, I'm in a public school. I'm just gonna read the Bible. I'm a good reader. I'm an advanced reader at a higher reading level than my age. I'll just read this. I'm gonna learn all the things about what it means to be a moral person and a good. I'm gonna read the words of God Himself. It's gonna be great. And it was just, I started with Genesis, and it's like animal sacrifice, animal sacrifice. This guy lived to 1,332 years old. Don't believe it? Fuck you. Animal sacrifice. And it's just like, this was the book written by the omnipotent, all-knowing, and all-good creator of the universe? I don't fucking think so. It looks like it was written by like a 200 BC meth addict who had a real penchant for killing lambs. Okay, this shit doesn't make any fucking sense. And it's all the fucking, because I didn't really realize this part. When you go to church every day for, you know, the first 11 years of your life, all of the cute little, you know, adorable little, you know, floofy passages they read to you when they're reading from that stupid fucking marble altar is just like all the stuff from the New Testament with those classic Jesus one-liners. Oh yeah, may he who was sinless cast the first stone, whatever the fuck it was. And then when you read the actual book, the majority of it is all dog shit fucking pagan slop. For all their, no offense pagans, for all their pretending to hate the pagans, this is like, and then he built a temple that was this big and this wide and had this many altars, and they burned this kind of incense, and then they sprinkled the lamb's blood, and everyone did a rain dance, and everyone was fucking happy. It's like, when you read that as a kid, you're like, okay, this seems like kind of bullshit. You know what I'm saying? And then I went to Portland, Oregon for 7th grade, and then I actually met kids who called themselves atheists for the first time. Not that I think that was necessarily the reason I did it, but you know, they didn't talk about it that much. You know, not like all the Christian friends who, oh, can I talk to you about my Lord and Savior? You know, it wasn't quite like that, but it kind of, it was like, oh, and then one day, and early, it was actually, now I think about it, it was earlier, it was probably September or October, like earlier in the school year, you know, still very interested in football. And I was working on my English homework. I did something stupid related to, you know, I don't even remember what it was. But anyway, my parents went on a trip somewhere, and we went to Red Robin for dinner, and then they left me at the hotel to go do their little adventure. Oh, thank you, Joe, for the, well done. Thank you. But I remember sitting at a hotel after eating Red Robin, and I was like, okay, I've been thinking about this for a while. I'm going to think about it. I'm going to make a decision. Do I still believe in Christianity or not? I don't know how long before that it had been percolating, but it was enough to the point where I decided I had to actually like sit down and have I am thinking about this and making a decision night. And so I sat there with the lights off in my bed in the hotel room and just lay there thinking about it. Like, I guess trying to telekinetically connect with my deity and say, can you tell me that you are real? And I was like, oh, wow. I've just been imagining this shit the whole time, haven't I? Well, it's not even, I always felt a little bit like, well, shouldn't I be able to feel him? All my fucking Christian family members, oh, I talk to God all the time. Well, shouldn't I, like, is he gonna appear to me as like a force ghost or something? What's going to go on? And as I thought more about it, I realized more painfully, because religion really makes it painful for you. They really dig the talons in, so that if you ever manage to drag it out, it's actually not a very pleasant experience emotionally or mentally. But you know, they teach you that if you question your God, you will burn in a fire forever. So it's kind of an abusive relationship setup they got there. Not throwing any, you know, hate. I'm just saying, kind of feels that way a little bit. But and yet we're the groomers, right? But no, I sat about it, thought about it. I was like, you know what? I actually think this is all bullshit. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, I could have easily been born into a Muslim family. Does that make, oh, wow, the Muslim God's real? Like, it doesn't make, it's fucking bullshit. You know what I'm saying? I was born in a specific region in the United States, and that's why I'm Christian. Like, how fucking stupid is that, right? So that was my thought process at the time. And, you know, I didn't even have any political beliefs or anything. That came later. When I started forming those, I was even more happy that I had fucking left that bullshit, because who knows who I would be now if fucking I didn't make that decision. So I sort of slowly and painfully, okay, Jesus, I'm letting you go. You know, imagine that you're cross above me. Okay, goodbye. I know you're not real anymore. It's like Frosty the Snowman fucking walked off into the distance, never to be seen again, kind of a thing. And yeah, that was my 7th grade atheism journey. How was yours? Oh, the Catholics. My father was very upset. I think he was taking me to some sort of Asian Christian church. Am I making this up? What was that? What ethnicity was that? Hold on. I'm looking this up. Google Maps. Why am I Googling Google Maps? Am I a moron? Hold on. What was the church near us? I'm doxing 7th grade me's address right now in real time. Was it near this prime rib place? Well, I'm gonna bring it up, and then I'm gonna, because you went up, you turned right, and you went up the hill a bit. There's a church somewhere. Does it still exist? Dude's Grill. I'm not gonna remember any of this shit. If I remembered how many blocks it went up, I would be able to find it in a heartbeat. But like, Vietnamese. He took me to a Vietnamese Catholic church. That's crazy. Dad, I don't think we're Vietnamese. I'm not sure about that one though. I thought we were Irish or something. Can I get like a street view though? I feel like a moron. I know. Oh, it's this one. All right. Let's set the stage here. Ahem. Uh-huh. So if you go up this boulevard, is it this one? This is very distracting. Is it this place? Right here? I think it's this one. Right? A Vietnamese Catholic church. Gao Ho whatever. He was taking me to this place. Were they speaking Vietnamese? There's no way, right? There's no way. But we were parked on this corner or something. Or maybe it was... No, not down there. Up here. And that's where I told him. I confessed to him. I'm like, Dad. Oh, unfortunate. I don't think I believe in religion anymore. And he was in the driver's seat. I was in the passenger seat. He was like, "What?" And he smacked the driver's wheel. And he was very upset. I would learn later, because he had like promised to my when my mother was dying when I was 2, he like promised to her that he would keep me in religion and God or whatever in the church, and made sure of all of that. So kind of unfortunate. Should I be talking about all this right now? But yeah, he made sort of an unkeepable promise that led him to be very upset later when I sort of made my own decisions, and that was very unfortunate. But yeah, I went to a Vietnamese Catholic church.